Jeremy Roenick was one of the premier players of his generation and one of the greatest American stars the NHL has ever known. After making his debut with the Chicago Blackhawks as a teenager, Roenick thrilled fans with his flashy style, take-no-prisoners approach, and jaw-dropping skills. A 9-time All-Star, Roenick played 18 NHL seasons and racked up over 500 goals and 1,400 penalty minutes. Roenick's competitive fire was unmatched and is best illustrated with his conflicted and often painful relationships with USA hockey peers Tony Amonte, Derian and Mike Modano. But Roenick's high-intensity persona extended off the ice and resulted in a series of controversial events that have often overshadowed his on-ice achievements. So let's take an in-depth look at the fascinating career of Jeremy Roenick and examine why, despite all he achieved as an NHL player, the man they call JR has been ignored by the Hockey Hall of Fame.
They can all kiss my...
Jeremy Roenick was born in Boston, Massachusetts, January 17, 1970. Due to his father's career as a corporate executive at Mobil Oil, the Roenicks moved around the USA quite a bit. The Roenicks were so committed to their son's hockey career that when Jeremy was 14, they put him on a plane each Friday in Fairfax, Virginia, so he could fly to New Jersey to play bantam hockey for the New Jersey Rockets. Jeremy was a dominant player for the Rockets, and he joined Michigan youngster Mike Modano as the two premier teenage players in the U.S. Roenick would eventually return to Massachusetts and enroll at Thayer Academy outside of Boston, where he'd team with future NHLer Tony Amonte and put himself on the NHL radar with 149 points in 48 prep school games. Roenick's speed and skill were elite, but the NHL teams were wary that his stats were inflated versus inferior prep school competition. They were also concerned with his weight, which hovered around 150 pounds. But after watching him record 9 points in 7 games at the 1987 World Junior Championships, the Chicago Blackhawks chose him 8th overall in the 1988 NHL Draft. Roenick was the second American to be chosen, behind his chief rival in youth hockey, Mike Modano, who will appear later in this video. Also drafted was Roenick's best friend and teammate, Tony Amonte. The 18-year-old Roenick enrolled at Boston College, but attended just one class and quit school after reading one professor's lengthy syllabus. Instead, he signed an NHL contract with Chicago GM Bob Pulford, worth $300,000 over 3 seasons, plus a $50,000 bonus. He had a good training camp in Chicago and played 3 NHL games, but he wasn't quite NHL ready. So the Hawks sent him to Quebec Junior Hockey League's Hull Olympique, a franchise owned by Wayne Gretzky. In Hull, Roenick piled up 70 points in 28 games and in mid-season played on Team USA in the 1989 World Junior Championships, where he again excelled, scoring 16 points in 7 games. Roenick returned to Hull, but due to a rash of injuries in Chicago, he was a last-minute emergency recall to the big club for a February 14, 1989 game in Minnesota. The Blackhawks trainers never had time to stitch his name on a jersey, but the kid wearing number 27 scored his first NHL goal in a Blackhawks win.
Back pass from Roenick, but it was at the feet of... Here's the shot, they score! Oh, a misplay by Kerry Taco, and the first NHL goal for Jeremy Roenick. The puck came off the end boards, and Roenick, seeing that Taco had misplayed it, worked to the net and banged it in easily, 1-0 Chicago.
The teenage Roenick scored at a point-per-game pace to close out the regular season and gained the respect of his teammates in a playoff game versus the St. Louis Blues on April 26, 1989. In the first period, he was accidentally cut on the nose with Steve Larmer's skate and had a gash that required 15 stitches. In the second period, he was cross-checked in the mouth by hulking Blues defenseman Glenn Featherstone and spit out 4 teeth. After getting his mouth stitched, he returned to action and scored the game-winning goal as the Blackhawks eliminated the Blues from the playoffs. In 1989-90, Roenick's first full NHL season, he compiled 66 points and took a big leap in the 1990 postseason with 11 goals in 20 games as the Blackhawks advanced to the conference finals.
By Casey, rebound, in behind the net. Now Larmer dug it out in front to Roenick, fires, he scores! Jeremy Roenick! After the Larmer steal, 4 unanswered goals for Chicago!
By this point, Roenick had developed into an aggressive, agitating player, flying around the ice, delivering punishing checks and scrapping with bigger foes. According to Roenick, his style was the creation of head coach Iron Mike Keenan, referred to by some as the most hated coach of all time. But in his 2012 book, Roenick says, quote, I love the man for molding me into the player I became. He was Dr. Frankenstein, and I was his creation. He was a father figure to me and nurtured my game through a tough love approach. Playing in a line with Michel Goulet and Steve Larmer, Roenick collected 94 points in 1991 and played in his first NHL All-Star game. And what a special game it was for Roenick, as this game was played at Chicago Stadium.
At center from the Chicago Blackhawks. Among the league leaders in power play goals, game-winning goals, and plus-minus, number 27, Jeremy Roenick.
At season's end, the Blackhawks gave Roenick a 5-year, $5 million contract. Chicago won the President's Trophy, the NHL's best record, but they were bounced in the first round of the playoffs. In the 1991-92 campaign, the Blackhawks revamped their roster, adding tough veterans Brent Sutter, Steve Smith, Brian Marchment, and Brad Lauer. Although the Hawks' regular season performance slipped a bit, the team was better equipped for postseason battles. In the regular season, Roenick collected 103 points, and on March 7, 1992, he hit the 50-goal plateau in his hometown.
Roenick over in behind the net with it. Roenick trying to center with deflected. They score! The 50th goal of the year for Jeremy Roenick goes in from the corner as he shot it off a Bruin player. It isn't pretty, but JR makes history, becoming only the third Hawk player to score 50 goals in a season, and his teammates love it.
Roenick stayed hot in the playoffs, scoring 12 goals in 18 postseason games as Chicago tore through St. Louis, Detroit, and Edmonton to advance to the Stanley Cup Finals.
Defense by McIver. Now Goulet held it in. Got it around the board. Chelios centered one. They score! Hawks win! Jeremy Roenick tipped it in! Hawks win in overtime!
The Blackhawks were no match for Mario Lemieux and the Pittsburgh Penguins in the Stanley Cup Finals, but the future looked bright for both Roenick and the Chicago franchise. At series end, Keenan relinquished his coaching role and became solely the GM. Then in November of 1992, owner Bill Wirtz fired Keenan without providing a reason. Roenick was devastated by Keenan's dismissal. Nonetheless, he delivered 2 more 100-point seasons, but the Hawks, now coached by Daryl Sutter, began to decline. Roenick also admits that without discipline provided by Keenan, his off-ice life began to spin out of control. By this point, he was enjoying wild Chicago nights with Bulls players Michael Jordan, Ron Harper, and Dennis Rodman, and he was making the most of his celebrity status. Chicago fans loved the scrappy and skilled Roenick, and he loved them back. He never turned down an autograph and was the most media-friendly player in the league. In 1992-93, Roenick won the Chicago Sports Profile's Humanitarian of the Year award. Roenick could be counted on to produce in big situations, and he did just that with an overtime goal versus Toronto in the 1994 playoffs, a goal that was set up by high school friend Tony Amonte and what proved to be the final goal at Chicago Stadium.
Picked out of midair to Amonte, set him up, Roenick! Hawks win! Hawks win! Hawks win! Jeremy Roenick, after the giveaway was forced by Amonte. What a play by Tony Amonte and Jeremy Roenick!
In 1993-94, Roenick gained additional infamy thanks to EA Sports NHL Hockey 94, where he was apparently programmed to be the NHL's greatest player, an unstoppable cheat code, hockey's version of Techno Bowl Bo Jackson. In real life, Roenick battled injuries and averaged about a point a game in 94-95 and 1995-96, while still playing an all-around aggressive game. He suffered his first major injury, the result of a knee-on-knee hit by Dallas Stars defenseman Derian in 1995. 4 years later, Hatcher would deliver even more pain to Roenick, as we'll see later in the story. The incidents with Hatcher illustrate that Roenick knew the code of hockey well. If he was going to play a chippy, sometimes dirty style, he'd have to answer the bell at some point. But that didn't deter him from becoming the rare skill player who would also dish out devastating hits.
Mark Freer's pass didn't click.
Wow, and Freer's out cold. What a hit.
Really got leveled. Looked like a clean hit, didn't it?
He's admiring his pass. You're taught never to look at the pass. Make it to keep your head up and bang shoulder to chin. And down he goes. He was out before he hit the ice. Great hit. Roenick didn't jump, didn't leave his feet, and he hit him with his shoulder. A great hit.
Terry Cartner had a big hit from Roenick.
Jeremy Roenick with a good hit on Cartner. Ed Cartner admiring the dump out.
There's a big hit. Roenick decking Cullimore.
JR just brought about the third biggest cheer in the building tonight.
To Roenick's credit, when it came time to settle accounts, he didn't shy away from engaging with the NHL's toughest players such as Bob Probert, Marty McSorley, and Craig Berube. When Roenick's contract was up in 1996, he reached an impasse with the Hawks and, to the chagrin of Chicago fans, he was traded to the Phoenix Coyotes for Alexei Zamnov and Craig Mills. Coyotes GM Bobby Smith agreed to Roenick's contract demands of 5 years at $20 million. Roenick was the perfect player to help sell NHL hockey in Phoenix, promoting a team that had just relocated from Winnipeg. Roenick and his teammates spent countless hours in the Phoenix community. It's probably no coincidence that a future #1 overall pick grew up in Arizona and was an enthusiastic Coyotes fan. Over the next 5 years, Roenick scored at a point-per-game pace while collecting over 100 penalty minutes each year. Led by the Massachusetts Mafia of Roenick, Keith Tkachuk, and Craig Jenney, the Coyotes were always competitive, but didn't advance in the playoffs, and the franchise was continuously battling financial woes. Roenick continued to play on the edge, and he would be held accountable for his bellicose play. With 12 games left in the 1998-99 season, he KO'd Dallas Stars center longtime rival Mike Modano with a devastating and borderline hit. But Dallas and Phoenix would play again 3 weeks later, and the smell of revenge hung in the air. And it didn't take the Stars long to exact it.
So we go to Dallas, Mike Modano not playing, concussion. In the papers that morning, we're going to get retribution. We're going to get our payback on Roenick. First period, I'm coming around the net. Craig Ludwig slashes me in the thumb, breaks my thumb in 2 places. Split second later, literally no more than half a second later, Derian Hatcher comes flying, throws a high elbow, jumps into my head, and breaks my jaw in 4 places. So here I am laying on the ground, my jaw is cracked in 4 places. I can literally move my teeth, pull my jaw out of my mouth. I actually went back to the bench to show my trainer, and as I'm bleeding down my mouth, wiggling my teeth, the lady in the first row sees what's happening, boom, passes right out.
Amazingly, Roenick stayed in the game and took another shift, but was hit again and had to be rushed to the hospital. Just 19 days after major jaw reconstruction surgery, Roenick returned to play in Game 7 of a Round 1 playoff series versus St. Louis and played 26 minutes in a Coyotes overtime loss. As Roenick admits in his autobiography, the Arizona years saw his family life suffer due to what he alludes to as a self-centered JR the superstar off-ice persona. His undisciplined behavior was destroying his family, which consisted of his wife, Tracy, and 2 children. Reports said his actions went from eccentric to bizarre. The rumor mill was in full swing. And that tension came to a head on October 9, 1999, when the Coyotes played the Blackhawks in Chicago. According to published reports, while at the game, Tracy Roenick learned that Jeremy had been slapped with a paternity suit by a Florida woman. According to sources, when that heated exchange ended, a wild-eyed Roenick stormed into the dressing room and snarled, quote, "Now I'm going to get that effing Amonte," referring to his longtime friend, Tony Amonte, who still played for the Blackhawks. An enraged and embarrassed Roenick took the ice for the 3rd period and inexplicably slashed Amonte in the face, opening a nasty wound. Roenick proceeded to hurl obscenities at Amonte as he was heading off the ice to get repairs. The NHL served Roenick with a 5-game suspension. Although he and Amonte eventually reconciled, Roenick admits their friendship was never quite the same. In 2001-2002, the Coyotes were under new management, with partners including Wayne Gretzky, and they began slashing payroll by trading Keith Tkachuk and Nikolai Halabulin while letting Roenick walk in free agency. The Philadelphia Flyers were seeking a replacement for Eric Lindros and signed Roenick to a 5-year, $37.5 million contract. Now, prior to arriving in Philadelphia, Roenick helped Team USA to a silver medal in the 2002 Olympics.
The goaltender wasn't in the net. Tony Amonte's in the high slot. Shot. Score! Roenick!
Putting NHL grudges on hold, 2 of Roenick's closest teammates on Team USA were Tony Amonte and Mike Modano. Roenick enjoyed 3 solid seasons in Philadelphia, but had an often acrimonious relationship with defensive-minded coach Ken Hitchcock. At this point, the NHL was deeply entrenched in the dead puck era, and Roenick's output, like most players, began to decline, and controversy continued to follow Roenick to Philadelphia. On December 17, 2002, Roenick received a 2-game suspension for this crushing hit on Mike Modano. Unlike 3 years prior, the Stars did not retaliate.
A suspected concussion on Mike Modano, who could barely get himself back up, and once he did do that, his knees buckled again on his way off the ice.
In 2004, it was revealed that former NHL star Rick Tocchet, then an assistant coach of the Phoenix Coyotes, had financed an illegal sports betting ring whose clients included Roenick. Roenick also acknowledged paying more than $100,000 to a Florida firm that sold betting tips to gamblers. Tocchet was suspended by the NHL for 2 years, but Roenick, who was never the target of the investigation, was not suspended or charged with a crime. The fiasco with Tocchet was one of many interesting and mostly painful events Roenick endured in 2003 and 2004. For example, in January 2004, Roenick was hit in the face by a puck at practice. It required 27 stitches to his face. Soon after that mishap, he was twice high-sticked in a game in Buffalo, with no penalty called. He proceeded to throw a water bottle at referee Blaine Angus, and then launched into an infamous post-game tirade that resulted in a 1-game suspension.
I mean, it's ridiculous. Wake up already. It's a joke. Wake up. NHL, wake up. Have the referees responsible for their actions too.
Roenick's fortunes went from bad to much worse on February 8, 2004, when the Flyers were at Madison Square Garden to play the New York Rangers. The Rangers' Boris Mironov blasted a slap shot from the point that struck Roenick in the side of the face. The result was 21 broken bones in his jaw and major reconstructive surgery. He also suffered a severe concussion. Roenick returned to action late in the season, and the Flyers advanced to the Eastern Conference Finals before losing to the Tampa Bay Lightning in 7 games. Ironically, Roenick's line mates during that run were Tony Amonte and Alexei Zamnov, the player he was traded for years earlier. Roenick continued to be a clutch player, as exhibited by his 2-goal performance in Game 6 of the Eastern Conference semifinals to eliminate the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Look out, they're up there again. These Flyers are coming hard. Score! That is it. Jeremy Roenick got a break, cut in, and beat Ed Belfour after the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Roenick finished the series still suffering from concussion symptoms that would worsen throughout the 2004 offseason. When the NHL lockout wiped out the entire 2004-2005 season, no players were to be paid except injured players. Roenick was compensated as he was classified as an injured player due to his concussion symptoms. Roenick gained a lot of attention with this comment during the lockout.
And everybody out there who calls us spoiled because we play a game, they can all kiss my They can all kiss my.
When NHL play resumed in 2005, the Flyers pursued free agent Peter Forsberg, but first needed to shed cap space. To reduce payroll, Roenick was dealt to the LA Kings for a 3rd-round draft pick. With his showmanship, Roenick was looked at as the perfect fit in LA. He made the rounds of talk shows, appeared in small acting roles, and attempted to bring Hollywood fun to the post-lockout NHL. But Roenick, who never worked out during that lockout, was 20 pounds overweight, and after scoring twice in the first game with the Kings, he was unproductive, scoring just 9 goals and adding 13 assists for the season. Roenick may have been a fan favorite wherever he played, but LA was one exception. Roenick wanted to redeem himself and return to LA for another season, but incoming coach Mark Crawford called him, quote, mentally weak and sent him packing. Roenick did make a 1-year return to Arizona playing for coach Wayne Gretzky and the Coyotes, but it seemed he was required simply for the publicity hit. Banished to the 4th line, Roenick had a testy relationship with Gretzky and endured another lackluster season. Heading into the 2006-2007 season, most, including Roenick, assumed his career was over. But ex-teammate and San Jose Sharks GM Doug Wilson thought Roenick would make the perfect 3rd-line center on his rising team. Roenick accepted the offer, worked himself into shape, and enjoyed 2 solid seasons in San Jose. Now, his stay in San Jose was highlighted by hitting the 500-goal milestone on November 17, 2007. In 2007-2008, Roenick scored 14 goals, 11 of which were game winners. And he'd continue this clutch play with a 2-goal, 2-assist performance to eliminate the Calgary Flames in the 2008 playoffs.
Roenick
35 coming up on the power play. There's the shot through traffic. Roenick scores! Jeremy Roenick! He scores! And it's 3-2!
Roenick played just 42 games in the injury-plagued 2008-2009 season. Now 38 years old, he had received over 600 stitches to his face, 12 diagnosed concussions, had broken every finger, and endured multiple shoulder and knee surgeries. After 20 years, he was spent. It was time to retire. Jeremy Roenick concluded his NHL career with 513 goals, 703 assists, and 1,216 points, and 1,463 penalty minutes. He'd add another 53 goals in the playoffs. Roenick played in 9 NHL All-Star games and was elected to the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame in 2010, coincidentally in the same class as old nemesis Derian. In 2011, his number 97 was placed in the Arizona Coyotes Ring of Honor. Roenick had a well-traveled career, but in his heart he's still a Chicago Blackhawk, as evidenced by his emotional reaction to the Blackhawks' 2010 Stanley Cup Championship.
I can tell.
Congratulations.
You're emotional.
Absolutely.
Why is it affecting you?
Chicago Blackhawks, man. I didn't get to do that. It's pretty unbelievable.
In retirement, Roenick remained in the spotlight, achieving success in the celebrity golf circuit and creating controversy as a hockey analyst for NBC. Roenick didn't hold back when criticizing the likes of Sidney Crosby, John Scott, and most notably, ex-teammate Patrick Marleau. But Roenick's TV career disintegrated on December 23, 2019, when NBC suspended him indefinitely for making inappropriate comments about coworker Catherine Tappan during an interview on the Spittin' Chicklets podcast. NBC fired Roenick after his suspension ended in February 2020. In July 2020, Roenick filed a lawsuit against NBC Sports for wrongful termination, but that case was eventually dismissed. When Jeremy Roenick retired in 2009, he was often referred to as a future and certain Hall of Famer. His numbers and all-around game can never be questioned. Neither can his competitiveness. Just ask his friends and teammates Tony Amonte, Derian and Mike Modano. He always played through severe injuries and went above and beyond to help grow the game. But a decade after he became eligible, his Hall of Fame induction is no longer certain as he watches comparable players earn that honor while his name fades from the discussion. So why has Jeremy Roenick, a player with such great respect for the game and its legends, been unable to earn the ultimate respect from the Hockey Hall of Fame Selection Committee? Perhaps it's his willingness to speak his mind that has kept him out of the Hockey Hall of Fame. Some point to his lack of championships or individual honors. Roenick's numerous off-ice controversies could be hurting his chances as well. And although he was a respected teammate, he alienated many hockey people with his unvarnished opinions, his need for the spotlight, and his sometimes dirty play. So what do you think? In the comments, let us know, does Jeremy Roenick belong in the Hockey Hall of Fame? If you enjoy the Jeremy Roenick story, check out this classic documentary of another legend of the game.